Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's meeting. Just a few public notices before we commence. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meetings page of the Council's website. And by choosing to attend this public meeting, you're deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is on the High Street opposite the Guildhall, and members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So that concludes the notices. Can I welcome all the people in the public gallery for attending this evening, particularly the speakers that will go through: Tony Matthews, Peter Jenner, Kate Harris and Natasha Jones, as well as representatives of Platform Housing. We have Lisa Farley, the Director of Housing Operations, Claire Greensall, the Head of Localities in Severn, Alan Hayward, the Managing Director for Platform Property Care, Kate Ellison, Director of Land Partnerships and Business Development, and Steve Eves, Director of Strategic Asset Management. Thank you for coming and attending this evening. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is appointment of substitutes. Do we have any substitutes?
Chair, yeah, we've got Jenny Barnes here this evening. She's here for Bash Ali.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declaration of interests.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, my employer is Sanctuary Housing, so I ought to declare it given the substantial item that we're about to get to.
Councillor De Serra.
Thank you, Chair. For the past 2.5 years, approximately every 6 months, I've gratefully received small grants from Platform Housing's Community Fund for the Open Door Cafe in Warndon. Their community fund has been a long-standing sponsor of this free community lunch, and its contribution is both significant and appreciated, although it represents just a small part of the overall funding for the project.
Thank you. Do we have any other declarations of interest? No? Thank you. We move on to public participation. I think, Julian, you've reminded speakers of the time limit. We've extended it for each of you this evening. Any questions that you ask in the public domain will most likely not be answered here tonight. We will take them away as written, and then we'll get Platform to directly respond, or if they're a council responsibility, we'll respond to you as a result of those. So can I welcome the first speaker, please, Tony Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening to the committee. My name is Tony Matthews. I and my wife live at 25 The Fairway in Warndon. I sat on the virtual planning meeting in June 2020, whereby I specifically recall the chair stating that local residents must be taken into consideration. The construction phase started March 21 and was advertised as ending spring 2022. For the last 4 years, we have endured the access road resembling a farm track for a long time due to the removal of a large amount of earth and underground service strikes, including the high pressure 315mm water main that was struck. Notwithstanding all the disruption from the associated activities that resulted in pedestrians having to walk in the road that cannot be regarded as a safe activity. On the M5 junction 6 to 4A, National Highways have been installing emergency refuges. They've taken 18 months. That particular operation is a lot more complex than the platform development has taken, and as we know to our displeasure, 4 years and counting. Had the services been installed in the correct location to start with, this project would not have taken so long. This issue was addressed at the start of the project. It's almost as if it was the case that some type of road was to be installed, houses constructed to provide income for platform housing, then address any issues as and when they occur. Whatever the strategy of this project was, it has failed miserably and spectacularly. Cadent have been working to relocate the gas main under the footway, but due to the stat plans, were not able to find what they were looking for, that took many holes to be dug, thereby exposing other services at the same time. The diagram, please, Julian. I hasten to add this is not to scale. The yellow line up the right-hand side, 22 to 24, is the new pipe that has been laid in. Takes a right angle turn left across under the road. That is also a new pipe. Right angle right for a short space. That was part of the original gas pipe. Another turn to the right, across and under the road, to join back up with the gas pipe that serves the development. The question we only asked was, why didn't it just go up the footway? The Cadent workers have simply done all they were told. The water, thank you, Julian. The water plans that Cadent had didn't even show the 315mm high pressure main. All that could be identified was a 63mm pipe on the plan that is in a completely different lower league. The stopcocks to 22 to 25 are in the bellmouth onto the access road, that's the actual physical junction, that under normal adoption conditions is not permitted. I sent an email on 12th of November 21 to raise this issue. Say no more. My experience of communicating with and receiving responses from platform was so substandard that I gave up out of exasperation and desperation, hence the need to speak to other parties. I'm aware that other residents are also of the same opinion. In communication to their customers who reside at 26 to 41, platform mentioned about the road as follows. 26th of September 24, lighting costs and timescales, with the issue being complete by the end of December 24. This has clearly failed. 7th of November 24, lighting mentioned again. 16th of January 25, lighting mentioned to be checked. 17th of February this year 25, mention of Cadent attending complete with dates. The question has to be asked, why weren't other local neighbouring and adjacent residents also kept in the loop about the access road? I refer back to point 1, where the chair of the planning meeting stated that local residents must be taken into consideration. Surely it is not beyond the realms of possibility to inform all those to be affected. Numerous people have spoken about damage to vehicles. Whether they inform platform or not, I'm not aware. Damage caused predominantly by raised manholes. Sorry. Maintenance to the development site has simply not happened, especially the landscape maintenance. I have trimmed a strip of grass, or should I say weeds, opposite 22 to 25 because it just looks scruffy and unkept. Another resident trimmed the left-hand bend grassed area for the same reason, and the same person also filled in sunken surfaces around the raised manhole covers. The contractor engaged to construct the development went into administration in February 24, over 12 months ago. So taking all of the above points into consideration, we feel thoroughly bewildered and underwhelmed by what we have witnessed. So maybe platform housing can understand why they are considered as unaccountable and not transparent. Pardon? 2 seconds literally. Had a private developer undertaken this project in such a manner, I do not see how they would still be operating as a business. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. You're welcome to stay back. There's probably a couple of questions in there before, which we'll take and present to the platform. There. Okay. Okay, the second speaker we have this evening is Peter Jenner. Peter, do you want to come up, please?
Thanks. Okay, I wanted to write all this out, but I just couldn't handle it. So, right, time is 7:12, it says. I'll be off in 5 minutes. In 2015, when I was 55 years old, I was in an almshouse in town, which was unsuitable. So I'm looking on Homes Choice Plus, for those of you who've heard it, social housing. And there was a flat, Spring Hill, Worcester, and I applied for it, and I was offered it. And I went along, and it's a block of 16 flats. I was offered it, and I said to the housing officer, why me? And he said, see that lot? There's over 200 people that have applied. We've checked you out. We know you're no trouble. You've grown up. You don't take drink. You don't take drugs. You keep yourself to yourself. You're a model tenant. As long as you're left alone. I said, that's right. I said, who's underneath? And I'd already checked, and they said a man who's in his late 70s on his own, as quiet as a mouse. He's effectively the only neighbour I can hear. Okay, I'm top floor. He's underneath. And I said, well, what happens if one day, unfortunately, he passes away? You're not going to move in. They said it's the over 55 rule. You know that when you applied. It says you can only bid on these properties, and it did apply then as it does now, even though it was 10 years ago. So I said, so there'll be nobody under 55. And I've got a history of drink and drug abuse from years ago. They said, no, nobody that's been involved in, active criminal, drugs, nothing. This block is for stable people. We try and keep this for people that will behave and know how to treat others well. So on that basis, I accepted it. I said, I'll take it. Everything was fine until June 2023, when unfortunately Mike, underneath me, who was in his early 80s by then, died. After it had been empty for some time, a woman moved in, and I happened to know her ex-boyfriend from the past. She was 39 when they moved her in. I know that. Everything was okay until they split up. She went off the rails. The point is, she relapsed and went back on drugs. And she was having all the druggies in. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. And it was mayhem in every way. Let me just say that. And I complained, or the neighbours complained. The neighbour underneath them on the ground floor, who's had a nervous breakdown, he can't work from home anymore. He's buying his flat. Right? Numerous investigations by platform. I'm sorry, I can only speak as I find. Sham investigations that go nowhere. Gaslighting me. Yeah? Moving on, they have been quieter since they were told you can't, keep having these people in. It has been somewhat quieter. Unfortunately, the lady who was offered the flat, the 39-year-old, one of these people that was going round to see her, he was in there.
Peter, if we can keep it high level, so we don't want to identify people.
I'm not going to. I haven't said anything. I don't intend to. I know that. There was just a lot of trouble. A notice appeared on the door, like legal injunction thing. I won't say his name, but it had his name. You're banned from this property within 100 metres, all that stuff. He stopped coming round. It quietened down a bit, but it was still... And of course the police have been involved in all this. They've said, the police, she should never have been allowed to come here. She was moved from a war zone, a druggy war zone in Warndon, because she was getting in bother. She promised she'd behave but it didn't pan out like that. So the point is, I had a phone call off platform a few months later, last autumn. We've got bad news for you. That man who was banned, he's now we've given permission for him to be her official lodger, lodger. So, and it's just screaming for the floor, abuse, mocking outside. Yeah, I've reported it time and time again. These people below, they know how to take it right up to the edge. They're crafty. They know exactly what they can and can't get away with. So look, I've had enough banging on about this. I think you've got the point. Just let me have a glance through my notes. Yeah, the man that's there, he's dealing drugs. How do I know? You see people coming and going. The stairwell stinks of synthetic cannabis, more commonly known as mamba. The police have identified the smell. You know, this isn't fantasy. This is true. The platform are allowing, she's breaching her tenancy conditions by allowing that to continue in her flat. Platform know full well what's going on. They're enabling her. So, okay. Time's up. Okay, I'm just about done, I think, anyway. Look, the doctor has said it's made me ill, physically and mentally. I've got proof. I want, you breached platform. I would never have moved in that place. I've been misled, right? She shouldn't be there. I'm on PIP. Okay. Do something. My MP's involved. Okay. No, it's okay, Jabba.
I'll make sure I'll take those forward, yeah.
You caused this, you fix it, you sort it out.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Jabba.
Next speaker we have is Kat Harris. Do we have Kat? Yeah, Kat, do you want to come up here?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kat Harris and I'm a resident in a platform housing property. Thank you, firstly, for the opportunity to speak. Firstly, I'd like to say that this meeting doesn't appear to have been widely publicised, and I was completely unable to find an agenda prior to attending this evening. I feel that this is a missed opportunity for platform residents to speak out. I know from my interaction with platform tenants in my locality that there is a lot of dissatisfaction, anger and disbelief at how difficult it is to communicate with platform, how uncaring they appear and how often they fail to complete repairs or to complete them in a substandard manner. I would ask that a further truly public, advertised and accessible meeting be considered for platform residents to hold their landlord to account. My main concern this evening relates to the presence of chrysotile, also known as white asbestos, in homes that are let by platform housing. It was by fluke that I discovered the presence of white asbestos in my home when an electrical contractor refused to undertake a repair due to the presence of it. I complained to platform housing in June 2024. And I took my concerns to the Worcester News. I was then sent a copy of an asbestos survey that was dated 2014. By escalating my complaint, a new survey was triggered, and I also received a copy of that. I am one person, one resident who was given this information because I would not go away. I was made aware by senior surveyors at platform housing that I shouldn't disturb the white asbestos, as this is when it presents a danger. Again, I was told. Unfortunately, by then, I'd already risked the health of my family and friends who had undertaken tasks such as putting up shelves and changing light fittings in my home. We do not know at this point if there'll be any long-term health implications to those people. In the course of trying to raise awareness to other tenants, I spoke to a reporter at Worcester News. Interestingly, a senior manager from platform housing went on record in the Worcester News with what I consider to be a blatant lie. He claimed this, and I quote, "We provide detailed advice to our customers about asbestos, why it can be a risk, where it is most likely to be found in the home, and how to report any concerns to us." This was definitely not my experience or that of the residents in my locality that I spoke to. I am here to request that the claim made by management in the Worcester News becomes a reality. I implore you, Platform Housing, to put the health and safety of your tenants at the forefront of your policies. Tell the people who live in your homes where white asbestos exists. Tell them about its presence and the importance of not disturbing it. And for any tenants that are hearing me right now, this is a product that creates a stippled effect on ceilings and walls. It was used widespread pre-1999 and it can be dangerous when it's disturbed. In a letter from Platform, which was a written response to my complaint on the 5th of August 24, a Platform housing manager has written this to me. It is always recommended that customers check with Platform before any drilling or minor alteration which may involve fabric of the building. This would enable specific advice on asbestos-containing materials to be provided at that time and in a proactive manner. Are we seriously saying that all tenants know this? Are we seriously saying that all tenants should go to the landlord before they put up a spice rack? I wonder how many tenants, along with their children, their partners, their friends, their visitors, have unknowingly risked their health. Thank you.
Kat, thank you very... Kat, really appreciate your... Yeah, that's fine. Kat, really appreciate your heartfelt concerns. And we'll pick those up with the Platform afterwards. Is that all right? Can I ask the fourth speaker, Natasha Jones, to come up, please? When you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Natasha Jones. I moved into my flat in Dent Close in August 2020 while pregnant with my son. Over the last 5 years, I've made several complaints regarding the damp and black mould in the flat that affects every room and every piece of furniture and clothing I have and have owned. Despite my many complaints, I've always been met with excuses from Platform and even been blamed for the mould. I had someone outside of Platform come and look and confirm that it is penetrative mould and not in any way my fault. Due to this, it has not only cost me a fortune in gas bills to try to keep the flat heated, it has also cost me a fortune to replace beds, furniture, clothing and toys for my 4-year-old son. Despite a member of Platform Housing sitting in my living room and telling me that the flat was an unlivable habitation and that I should be moved, they still have done next to nothing. They book appointments without talking to me first, and then they either don't show up for them or they give me excuses as to why it's my fault. It has affected my finances, my mental health and my physical health, and also the health of my child. I would like Platform to be held accountable for these issues, but I am sceptical it will ever be resolved, as even after I inform them that I will be taking the pictures to the local news, they have still not taken action. They have, however, upped my rent significantly, and I do not understand how they can justify that. I've had several other issues regarding noise, harassment from neighbours, abuse from neighbours, and none of these issues have ever been resolved. I've had warnings from Platform about noise in my flat regarding my child crying, as children do, and me talking at a normal volume in my own home with people in my living room, just having a conversation. They have threatened that I've been in breach of my tenancy and that it could lead to further action. And yet I'm awake every night because there are people above me screaming and shouting, and there are people running up and down the stairs in my building, having drugs all day long, all night long. I found pipes out in the hallway of my building before now, while with my son. They're a joke to me. Platform are an actual joke, and I feel very sorry for anyone having to deal with them. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Natasha, thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us about that. It's really, really appreciated. We'll follow those concerns up. And to all the speakers, can I thank you for taking the time to come here this evening and saying your words. Platform are here, they can hear you loud and clear. We've made a note of those concerns as well. Those that haven't, those that didn't manage to write into to us with your concerns beforehand, we'll follow up with a response for those. Those that have already written in, there is a response ready. Hopefully we should get back to you in the next week or so in terms of that. And just to answer the lady, I think it was Kat, in terms of this meeting being publicly not announced, a lot of members did a leaflet drop amongst platform housing. Some not all members. It was publicly advertised in the Worcester News as well. But we do admit that a wider reach could be reached, and we'll try to do that next time we hold one. Okay. I will help you with that. Okay. Thank you.
Likewise, if you need any help, let me know.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, guys. Thank you. That's the end of the public participation. So can I invite then Lloyd? Is it Lloyd? Are you doing it? Oh, sorry, yeah. Agenda item 4, the minutes of the last meeting. Can we go through them page by page? Page 1, 2, 3. Councillor Mace?
Yeah, thank you. There's on the minutes on page 3, there's a mention about written answers can be provided to following questions raised by members. The first one, which committee does the sinking fund for replacement of the Purgeswell 3G pitch sit with? I have not seen a written answer for that yet, so I was wondering if that could be provided, please.
Chair, this committee would oversee the Freedom Leisure contract, and therefore it would oversee the use of the pitch in effect, so it would sit with this committee.
Sure. Page 4, and then page 5. We all happy to sign the minutes off? Thank you. Those signed, then, Julian. So the agenda item 5 is the annual Platform Housing Group presentation. Can I invite officers from Platform to come forward, please? When you're ready, yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation to join you this evening. I think it's worthwhile just doing a round of introductions before we begin. I'm Liz Fairley, Director of Housing Operations at Platform Housing Group. To my right is
Stephen Eves, I'm the Director of Strategic Asset Management.
Alan Haywood, Managing Director for Platform Property Care.
Kate Ellison, Director of Land Partnerships and Business Development.
So I think you have a copy of our presentation, which I think you're going to run, and I'll talk you through it. We'll all take some turn. Please feel free to ask any questions as we go through. Is that going to be? Yes, please. If you can. Can you just go back to the beginning? Thank you. Great, thank you very much. Next slide. Okay, so this just talks about our strategic goals as Platform Housing Group, centred around people, places and platform. We work with our customers to improve what we do. We promote a workplace that motivates everyone to bring their best, provide safe, well-maintained homes and communities, deliver our platform standard for our homes, embed our long-term environmental, social and governance ESG plans, utilise insights through data, robust and secure information, and to remain financially strong. Next slide, please.
This slide just is giving you a profile picture of the
So
homes
questions
that
as
we
we go
have
through.
within Worcester City and a breakdown by tenure. Next slide, please.
Lisa, got a question from Councillor Sarah.
Okay.
I understood you wanted questions as you went along.
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
right? So I'm afraid you'll have to go back because you went rather quickly for me.
Okay.
I've got a particular question about the previous slide. That one, yeah. So within your 5 strategic goals, you talk about your aim to have good quality data, I think it is. I can't read it from here exactly.
Yes.
Reliable data, yes? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So I do have some points to make about that, if I may, at this
Of course.
juncture. So I have experienced frequent examples of poor data recording and management, and anecdotal reports come to me all the time indicating issues such as subcontractors coming out to complete work and reporting it as complete when it isn't, outdated phone numbers leading to missed appointments, complaints being improperly lodged or not lodged at all, confusion between jobs rates for platform properties and non-platform properties, possibly due to rushed email processing, and repeated follow-up emails for the same job that I have to send. Overall, I raised a question in committee last year when you came about the way in which your data was verified or audited. The response that came back didn't address the query about independent verification, but without proper auditing, the reliability of the data used to manage your business may be compromised. Therefore, my question is this: given these issues, is there a plan to implement independent auditing of your data to ensure its accuracy and reliability? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. So, first of all, I'd like to address the customer information that we hold. It's a key priority for us to ensure that we hold a range of information about our customers so that we can make sure that we can tailor our services to them and make reasonable adjustments. With that in mind, we've recently embarked on contacting all 50,000 of platform customers to ask them a suite of questions about their personal circumstances, checking their contact details, what their preferences are for their contact communication, so that we can make sure that we're reaching people really swiftly in the way that they would prefer. So at the moment, we're in the data gathering period, and then we're going to look to operationalise that. And that will then ensure that people are getting that service. In terms of system data, we are audited for that. We're audited by a separate outside auditors. I don't know if I'm able to say who they are here, but we have assurance via our external auditors in respect of our data. Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. So this is about Platform Hub, which is our contact centre, and this slide gives information about the performance of the hub through to the 31st of December. As you can see, we've got a large amount of calls coming in. Our service level agreement, which is the SLA, is 94.39. And at that point, 961 callbacks were requested. I know historically wait times have been an issue, and as you can see, that has reduced down significantly and continues to reduce down and is currently below 1 minute.
Lisa, I've got Councillor Sarah again.
Thank you, Chair. So on the Performance Hub, I've got considerable experience of using your digital reporting system to raise issues that residents come to me with. So I've raised over 80 cases with you in the last 6 months alone. However, the lack of integration between the initial inquiry that I put into your customer feedback email and then the subsequent job that gets raised and fed back to me, there is no link between the two. I think they're two separate systems. I've been told this anyway, that the entry has to go initially through the customer feedback, gets entered at a certain point. It's triage there, that's fine, you need to triage, and then it gets put into a completely separate system. So I have no way of tracking my original query with you, and neither do you, vice versa. And therefore the opportunities for losing things or having to make multiple inquiries about the same thing, very easy to see how that would happen. But I have two particular questions. Of the 174,000 online contacts, presumably just for Worcester, how many resulted in actual jobs in your system following triage? And Second question, is there a plan to streamline this process and properly link the two online inquiries to the jobs generated in the system? An integrated customer relationship system like that would likely reduce duplication and errors and give you efficiency. I just wondered if there were any such plans for that investment in the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to take that question away. I can't give you that information today, but we'll definitely come back to you and give you clarity on that. I think regarding the system, we are embarking on strengthening our portal, our self-service portal, so that you can do just this. Alan may wish to add some comments at this point, but we are strengthening it, and we recognise that people want to be able to track their jobs and see where they are.
Yeah, I'll add to that, yeah. So in August, we will have a true customer ability for the customer to appoint repairs, so that you'll get, through that portal, you'll get an actual date and an appointment. I think that will allow not only you'll go through the same process in terms of the engineer and triaging, but it'll be direct from your input. There's a series of codes in the background, so it makes it simple, and that will be definitely a step forward. So just to clarify, August we'll be using a test process with customers, so that should be quite a step forward.
Supplementary. I'd like to offer my services to help with that. My job when I used to work was a software tester. I'd be happy to help.
Thank you. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Sorry, yes.
Thank you. On Saturday, I had to phone up the emergency line for the Henrik House block of flats, where there was no water. And there hadn't been water overnight, and I phoned up at 12:30. So that 1.5 minutes does not seem to work on the emergency line, even though it's an emergency line. Beyond that, as a councillor, once I'd explained the issue, that there were a lot of vulnerable people, maybe 70, 80 vulnerable people in 50 flats, and that they'd got no water at all, it seemed to be a real problem, because all of a sudden it was, oh, you're not our customer, so go and find a customer, go and find a resident, and then phone back. Even though a lot of residents had already phoned in. So either you're not taking careful notes, or there's no joined up system, but it does mean that your team should have been able to spot that there was a situation and been aware of it, so when somebody else phones up, it's already a known situation and it should be sorted. Now, it took almost 24 hours for residents in that block to get water back, and that is completely unacceptable. And obviously I'll probably make some more comments later on in your presentation, but part of the problem was that I don't think that the people you're employing to do some of this work actually care enough. They can walk off a job with a block of flats and no water, and that's completely unacceptable. And I think there needs to be a review of the standards you are expecting from the people who work for you. Thank you.
Can I just respond to that? So first of all, I'd like to sincerely apologise for the situation that arose. We have contacted all of our customers to apologise, and we're also giving them £50 each for the inconvenience during that period. We had a contractor who was doing some work, and unfortunately the work did not go to plan, and that's why the situation arose. They came back and tried to put it right, and felt that they had put it right, only to find that the situation deteriorated again. So we were aware of it, and we were working really, really hard to fix it. However, as a customer, I absolutely understand why they felt the way that they did. But I just want to assure the committee and platform customers that are here today that we're working very hard to get the water back on.
We'll come back on that, Jenny, and then we'll move on. Yeah.
Briefly, then it needs to be that you train also your telephone staff to understand that when a councillor gets in touch, they're not doing it for the fun of it. There's something serious going on, and we need to be respected for that. But I didn't feel respected.
Yeah, I'm very sorry about your experience, and that's something that we'll take the learning from.
Thank you.
Apologies.
Claire, I'm just going to say something before we move on there. I mean, that is unfortunately an experience from the majority of the councillors around here. We've time and time requested telephone numbers, direct contact details from you, but you failed to provide them. You only provide us with email addresses, and that is a classic example when a councillor is called to do their civic duty to help their residents, and then we just can't get through to anybody senior enough to get to the root of the problem. We have to go through the same pain that these people at the back are suffering, hours and hours of calls trying to get through to the right person to get some emergency services sorted. And this is what other housing providers in this city have provided us with, direct contact details at senior level that we can reach out of hours, at emergency times, that we can contact with them. And that's a fundamental difference here that from what we're experiencing. And you are a large organisation. You've got nearly 6,000 properties in here. You understand? We've got housing associations, you know, that have got less than that we can get through to. We've got a good on terms. So I just want to make that point clear to you this evening, because that direct contact is absolutely essential in times like those, in times of our greatest need for our residents, that we're there for them. In the middle of the night, we're trying to help them. Throughout the day, we're trying to help them, and we can't get through to the right people. That is the wrong message to send out here. I'll let you carry on.
I would like to respond there to say I'm pretty confident that we have sent some information out, but I'll double check and we'll recirculate it again. Okay.
Just to come back on that, we have email addresses, we don't have telephone numbers. Committee, I'm going to run through the slides first before I take any more questions. Is that all right? We'll,
who are living in our homes in Worcester City to help with food, household goods at times of need, support with white good replacements such as washing machines, cookers, furniture and beds, and combined awards as well that we give out for all of the above categories. So you can see the total number of awards and you can see the amount of awards that have been given. We've also made some contributions to Armchair, a charity, a recycling charity in Worcester of £6,000, because we recognise that there is furniture poverty. And also we've got Worcester Municipal Charities, which we've made a payment of £10,000 to those in financial need so they can access essential items and services. Sitting alongside our Wellbeing Fund team, we've also got our Successful Tenancies team, and their work involves supporting customers to maximise their income and to make sure they're getting access to all of the benefits that they are eligible for, and really to sustain their tenancies with us. So customers can self-refer, or they can be referred by other agencies. They can be referred by the neighbourhood officers and a range of other people that are working with our customers. And you can see the referrals there. So again, we're on track to achieve the same level of referrals from 23-24. and the financial outcomes at the moment are at the same level as what they were for the whole of 23-24. So that's money that's gone directly into the pockets of our customers for them to have the benefit of that. So benefit reviews is what the work team do, applications, appeals, they do income and expenditure assessments, and we have access to support through grants, funds and other schemes as well. So that's a really positive thing that we do for people who live in Worcester City in platform homes. Next slide, please. So I'm sure you are all familiar with our community engagement officer who works tirelessly across Worcester to deliver a range of different activities in partnership with key stakeholders. But we also have our community engagement and investment team. We have Platform Community Chest, and we also have something called Christmas Kindness Campaign where we make donations. So this just explains the amount of awards that we've made within the City of Worcester. So you can see that that has increased to date this year, quite substantially on the previous year. And you can see the community kindness again, Christmas kindness again, that was increased this year. So we made donations to food banks, furniture projects, warm hubs and spaces. You can see the number of activities that we've delivered. So 309 community events, 122 regular drop-ins for platform customers, 42 community walkabouts. We've also done the Royal Horticultural Society Garden Accolades, Big Stews, and retirement scheme art classes. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the many councillors that attend the neighbourhood walkabouts. Your contribution is really valued. I'd also like to make a special mention for Councillor Jill Desiree for the dedication that she gives to her patch and her monthly meeting with the locality's operations manager, so that you can work together proactively for the benefit of the community. Next slide, please. So this talks about the range of customers that are involved within Worcester City. So we have 26 community reps. They're people who live in those communities and they're sense checking the services that are delivered and working with us very closely to make sure that they feel that they're meeting the standard. We have 69 customers who are sounding board members, and these customers may be getting involved in things like co-creation projects. So, for example, we've recently done some work with platform customers on letter writing and whether or not the letters are accessible and understandable and fit for purpose. We also have a digital champion. That digital champion will go out and work with people who are digitally disengaged to support them alongside our digital engagement team. We have 3 complaints reviewers. All of our complaints responses are checked by customers before they're issued. And we also have 2 scrutiny panel members. And for those of you that aren't aware of that, our scrutiny panel members it's a legal requirement for us to have scrutiny, and they do internal scrutiny of our services. They're about to start one on ASB. They've recently done one on complaints. Next slide, please. So this just highlights some of the community engagement investment work that we do. So Newtown Green project, it's a community orchard there. There's been some work done around improving footpaths and walking routes and biodiversity projects. Friends of Tolladine, so that was established in 2024. So we have got a number of different activities there, breakfast clubs, afternoon tea, summer fairs. We've also got Smart Water, so it's 4th year of that, really important. So 200 homes on Cranham Drive, Warndon, have been issued with the packs, and the next phase is to deliver 150 packs to people living at Ranwick Drive. Fishing events, this has gone really successfully. So we've held 6 angling events in partnership with the Angling Trust. That's made a positive impact on several platform customers to address mental health concerns, loneliness and isolation. Safer community events. So we work with Pal Fitness and Worcester Youth Detached Team. We've been done trips to Skill Zone in Gloucestershire. We've visited high schools across Worcester, and we've done fire safety door knocks with fire service. And we've also participated in the play streets, so where streets are closed off. And there was recently an event at Arboretum that was attended by Tom Collins MP. And lots of similar events are planned as well going forward. And there's also, on the next slide, a photograph of that street closure, street play in action, which was a safe space for kids to get out on the street and have a nice time. Next slide, please. Collaboration is absolutely critical for us, and working with key stakeholders to deliver services. Also, our customers are really important to us. We want to work hand in hand with them. So it's really good to hear the voices of some platform customers who are dissatisfied today. And we will pick that up. And I want to assure everybody here that we treat this very seriously. It's important to us, and we will listen and we will act. So neighbourhood collaborations, we've done 31 walkabouts across the district with the police, local authority and with customers. We've got regular meetings with councillors, as I've mentioned. We meet at Dines Green, St John's as well monthly. We've got contact with councillors who reach out to us, and on Ronkswood this bi-monthly. And the themes around that are repairs, grounds maintenance, fly tipping and tenancy related issues. I would like to just point out the amount of fly tipping that there is here, and you know, some of the things that we're facing, and we would really welcome some partnership working on fly tipping. I know that we mentioned that at the last meeting about doing some partnership working. For the past 3 years, we've spent £300,000 a year on fly tipping and collections in Worcester City alone. That's £300,000 a year that we've done, and we've got the data to support that. So we would really welcome doing some partnership working in relation to that. Next slide, please. So formal complaints. This slide just gives a breakdown of the complaints that we have, some of the cases by department, so the dates as well of when complaints come in and how we provide category information, and also some interesting data there in relation to that. Most of the complaint data is in relation to responsive repairs, 51 of those, and we've got an average of 23 a month. Next slide, please.
If it's okay, I'll talk through these slides. Thank you. So this is repair satisfaction. Just to confirm, this is for the first 9 months of the year, so April through to December. There's 88.4% satisfaction. Just to clarify, that's a 4 or a 5 score out of 1 to 5. Just worth clarifying. Of that, 2,731 requests for feedback were issued. It's issued on completed works, another quite important point to remember. And of that, 30.6% were replied to by customers. So that's a build-up of the data. Next slide, please. Responsive repairs completed. Again, just to clarify, this is for 9 months. So 14,551 repairs completed. The average day to complete a repair is 38.2. And of that, 90.39 are completed right first time. So that's on 1 visit. The important correlation just to the previous slide, if we remember, we've asked for 2,731 feedback and we get 837 replies. So what we'd like to see, obviously, to see if we can increase that level of feedback, because it's very helpful for us to improve the service. Next slide, please. Responsive repairs logged. I think it's useful information because obviously we need to make sure we've got the service, adequate service to deliver this kind of demand. It's a 12% increase year on year, not unusual compared to other cities, local authorities. Just pointing out the December spike, January spike, that is offsetting some of the lower repairs, so it's not that high. It's offsetting December, which is quite low. So just pointing out that should be averaged out. So I think the important message there is 12% increase from previous year. Next slide, please. Similarly, what's quite helpful for us, we need to focus on the type of repairs. So we've got electrical, carpentry and plumbing, so that's water related. Those, again, not surprisingly, are the significant demand lead repairs, but you can see there's a tail off of others. Again, that's the 12% increase, but and total volume, but split by trade. Next slide, please. Improving property care. So our focus has been, I mentioned some of the statistics, 38.2 days to deliver repair, and the demand. Our focus has absolutely been to reduce the work in hand, so we reduce the repairs, particularly challenging over Christmas and winter period. We have done that. We've seen a reduction in net repairs, and that has been obviously welcomed. Going forward, there's some key changes. We have involved customers in terms of collaboration sessions. So we are the first one of those for my business was on Wednesday last week, and we're looking to make 4 key areas. I'll start from right to left on this. Improving controls. So this is where we're going out to deliver a responsive repair, but it develops into something else. We believe that controls need to be improved to make sure we're mapping that repair and that complex repair so it doesn't get lost in the system and we can communicate better to customers. Next to that, introducing localities model. We are in Worcester here today. We believe that we operate a central planning team, which is fine, but we're introducing local scheduling into all our key areas, Worcester being one. So that will mean that there's someone on point to jeopardy manage any issues in the day. Again, very important. So they're not left overnight. Next to that, mapping customer journey. So in simple terms, we want to make it easier to book a repair and for customers to know at what stage through that journey, including follow-ons, including any repeat visits are needed. We want to improve the clarity of where that repair is in the process. I think it's important to point out at this time as well, satisfaction that we talked about before is on completed works. We're proposing to break that down so there's an opportunity and we would request satisfaction at each point of the journey. So booking a repair when the engineer comes out, it gives us better transparency, so that's quite important for us. And recruiting more resource. So we are recruiting resource. We are recruiting resource that will align to the demand and the trades that we looked at on previous slides. That will be in place, well, starting in April, and will continue to April, May and June until we're up to an increased level of resource. Next slide, please.
And continues to be a key priority area for us, so we are always looking for new developments within Worcester City. Obviously, we've seen less opportunities coming forward over the last few years, so there isn't anything in the pipeline at the moment. We are looking at a number of schemes on the periphery, so Worcester Parkway, we've looked at Hoffields in the past, so big strategic schemes that would obviously contribute to the overall offer within Worcester City. But just a snapshot of some of the schemes we've completed since July 23. So we've built a total of 81 new homes across that period. 45%, so basically 45% of them have been social rent as well, which is a key priority for us within the city. As I say, we'd love to do more here and we are proactively looking for more opportunities and looking at them wider priorities across the Worcester area as well. Just to acknowledge as well the Tony's comments on the fairways and to just say we will be, everything's being noted. We have the backgrounds and history on that scheme and we'll come back with a full response. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Steve Eves, so I'm the Director of Strategic Asset Management. I just want to give you a bit of an update about some of the big spend that is taking place in Worcester at the moment. So this is data between September 2023 and January this year. And the amount of works that's been carried out is just shy of £13 million worth of works. So you can see here that there have been, what's really important for a lot of our customers are things like kitchens and bathrooms. And you can see here there's been over 100 kitchens replaced, over 100 bathrooms replaced, more than 700 entrance doors, more than 700 doors have been replaced as well. Those are kind of really key things for people living in our homes. But what is really important as well is that the world's changed a lot in terms of fire safety, in terms of damp and mould, in terms of making sure that things like compliance works are really important. And so we've been doing a huge amount of work to basically transform our compliance services. And you can see here that we've done over 1,200 fire remediation works to our homes. And we've also done over 2,500 pieces of major works. Now that will include fire compartmentation works to blocks of apartments, some of those including Meadow Court and Rowan Court as well. And so I just want to reassure you that it's not just about the kitchens and the bathrooms, it's actually about making the homes safer for our customers at the same time. And I just want to pick up on as well is that I've talked a little bit about building safety, and I note the point about asbestos. I'm very happy to have a kind of offline conversation with a lady about asbestos, and I want to take that back to our building safety team, our compliance
Yeah, I mean,
team
there are
as
two
well.
customers here specifically here for asbestos. So if you could meet with them outside, that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Damp, mould and condensation is a huge thing for all landlords at the moment. Some of you will be aware of our Ishak and the little boy that sadly died because his home was riddled with damp, mould, condensation. Last year we set up what was a customer process mapping group involving our customers. And getting that direct feedback, completing hundreds of surveys and questionnaires with those customers. And on the back of that, we transformed our response to damp, mould, condensation. So previously, last year, we might, at the beginning of last year, we was taking around 50 days to deal with damp, mould, condensation. In October, November and December, it was taking 5 days to deal with damp, mould, condensation. In January, it took...
Yeah, so if you're saying 5 days, this lady at the back who's spoken about, I think it's Natasha Jones, regarding her damp mould issues, was that repaired in 5 days then?
I don't know the specifics of that lady's details, but what I'd like to do is have that conversation outside and investigate that and certainly come back to you. Yeah. I just also want to give you some reassurance that year on year for the past 3 years, we've increased the investment in our homes by over 20% each year. So each year, our investment increases significantly and substantially. We recognise that there is going to be an even greater need for investment moving forwards as well. And that's a key project that we're working on as well, about how much more investment we can increase and put into our homes. There's also a big agenda, and this also overlaps a little bit with damp and mould and condensation, about energy efficiency in our homes. Essentially, if you've got a warmer home, that can really help in terms of reducing condensation and damp and mould. We've got a huge programme. In the Midlands, Platform has got one of the biggest programmes to retrofit its homes and improve its energy efficiency. So about 82% of our homes meet what's called EPCC, which is a government standard. So we have a target to hit 100% of that, 100% of our homes by 2030. And we've recently submitted bids for government funding, and we have a significant programme that involves external wall insulation, new windows, doors, photovoltaic solar panels, loft top-up, and air source heat pumps, all those kinds of renewable technologies that improve the energy efficiency and make our homes warmer and hopefully make them cheaper to insure for our customers at the same time. There was a point made about data as well, and I absolutely accept that data is a challenge. It's a challenge for every organisation. In the assets team, we know we've got some gaps in our data, and we're on a journey to improve that. So as of today, I can tell you that we have been in 67% of all of our homes to do physical property checks within the past 5 years. So but that's not good enough. So by this time next year, we will have been in 100% of our homes, and we will make sure that we go into 20% of our homes every year to do those physical checks. Now, in terms of that, that's fine. And I think the point is how do we know that that's a proper job that's been done well? Well, we've just employed a consultant that at this moment has just started a week ago that will be going into 2,000 of our homes to check the data that's been collected about those homes, to do those validation checks as well. So we want to make sure that we've got good quality data so that we know that we're investing in the right places and in the right homes at the same time. So that's just a very quick update on our capital works, investment works, but we've got a big project going on at the moment to make sure our homes are of a good quality standard.
Next slide, please. Okay, just some contact details there, and that brings our presentation to an end. So we are happy to take any additional questions that you may have.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll open it back up to the floor and take some questions. Got Councillor Lamb, Wilmore, Councillor Lawrenson, Mace and Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I've been councillor for St John's and since then Dines Green and Grove Farm for a while, and there's a concentration of platform housing properties in my ward. And I suppose whenever I come to these events, I always think there is a disconnect between what I might describe as this nice, shiny strategic vision, which is always put in a very nice corporate PowerPoint presentation, and the reality as it's experienced by the tenants. And I think that's a real issue, and it's been articulated in a more direct way than I ever can by some of the people who've come today. And, you know, we do have regular meetings with Joe Kelly. I'm going to credit where credit's due. We meet with Joe Kelly, and Joe Kelly does her best. But sometimes I feel she feels the frustration as well at being able to actually do things for tenants. And, you know, there are numerous issues that's been raised with me in recent years. And I can only think that it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a lot of people who live in platform housing who probably suffer in silence. And they reach a point of frustration where they raise it with their councillor. And I know, having been to some of these presentations before, platform housing are very keen to sort of build capacity to ensure that their tenants can speak directly to platform. But sometimes tenants get so frustrated with what they see as stonewalling and not being listened to that they turn to their councillors. And I occasionally get the feeling from platform, rightly or wrongly, that sometimes, you know, councillor intervention isn't really welcome and they don't really want to listen to us and they'd rather listen directly to their tenants. And just some examples, you know, issues with cannabis, you know, has been raised already, but issues with people smoking cannabis in Essex Close, which was a nightmare to one of my tenants, who in the end it was only resolved when she moved. Issues with a dispute over a tenancy succession in Drake Avenue. And that was really interesting because it was clear the tenant wasn't being listened to and was being stonewalled. So they came to me. I wasn't getting anywhere, so I made a formal complaint. And then as soon as I started the formal complaint procedure, miraculously the issue was resolved, and the person came back to me and said, oh, well, you don't want to complain about it now, it's resolved. So it was interesting that these formal complaints that were listed on the PowerPoint presentation are some of those, you know, is that the genuine number of complaints, or is it the number of complaints that actually reaches a particular process? Issues with rising damp in Gresham Road. There's been a recent issue that's raised by my colleague Councillor Udall about racist graffiti in Mayflower House in Gresham Road, which was reported in September. In October, it was going to be patched over. In January, it was an emergency job. And now in March, it's still not been resolved. And that's partly due to the subcontracting, whereby it's not done directly by platform, it's done by an arm's length organisation. And they take their time to actually get it done. Issues with broken fencing in Tudor Way, issues with broken kitchens in Tudor Way. My partner, who's also a councillor in Rainbow Hill, she reported a case that went on for ages in Tolladine about plants growing behind wallpaper and under floorboards that went on for ages. And you know, this is an issue where there are dangerous spores that can come out and endanger people who live in these tenancies. And sometimes there's just a feeling about unresponsiveness. And as councillors, we sometimes feel the only thing we can do is go to the press. We reach a point where we feel we're not being listened to, the tenants are not being listened to, and so we have to go to the Worcester Evening News and get them involved. And I sometimes get this feeling, you know, that Worcester, the platform housing is just too big. I know there are advantages of large organisations and economies of scale and all those wonderful economic terms that organisations use. But these weren't some of the issues we had with Worcester Community Housing. When you had a local organisation that was run locally and responsive to local people, you didn't have these problems. And I think sometimes it's that frustration that, you know, when I do send emails to the email address that was displayed there, it's sometimes very random how long and in what way I'll get any response as well. There's no kind of logic to it. There's no sort of, we will respond in 7 days. It seems to sometimes get an email straight away, sometimes get an email after 2 weeks, sometimes I get an email and I've forgotten what the issue was because it's been so long. So when you are a councillor, as I am, and we represent areas with lots of platform housing, it is probably one of the most frustrating parts of our job, and it does have to be resolved, because every year we have this presentation and every year we seem to have the same issues that we're concerned about. I'm so glad that people have come today, members of people who actually use these the platform housing, to say it in their own words, because I think that always carries with it so much more power than second-hand via a councillor. Thank you.
Do you want to respond, or do you want to take some more questions?
Yes, I mean, I would like to respond and say I'm really sorry that you feel that way, and I'm really sorry that you feel that you need to go to Worcester News to get your resolutions, or that any customer feels that need as well. I'll take away some of the points that you've raised, Councillor Lamb. I would like to address the comment about us being too big, which is something that, you know, we do hear when we attend the meeting quite regularly. And just to say, we do have a very significant presence here in Worcester. You know, we have a very large office in the centre of Worcester. We are a large employer in Worcester, and we also have a large, we add to the economy, and we also add to the economy through our supply chain here in Worcester. So I want to assure you that we are a local organisation, but also, more importantly, we have a localities operating model. And that localities operating model means that people are employed locally. So, for example, the neighbourhood officers, they all live locally. They're not coming in from an out of area to come in and work in the area. They live and working in the area. Claire here this evening is a Worcester person and has lived in Worcester for many, many years, all her life. So we are very committed to our localities, not just in Worcester City, but across all of our operational areas, in making sure that local people are working amongst the communities in which they live. There is work to do. I'm not saying that we get it right all the time, because we absolutely don't. But what I can say is that we're very committed at all levels of platform to getting it better and making sure that the customer voice is heard. So whilst, you know, yes, we do need to do more investment in our homes. Yes, we do need to respond more quickly. Often we do respond quickly, you pointed that out, but we need to be more consistent in the way that we do that, and we need to work within our published timescales to make sure everybody's aware of what that needs to be. I just want to assure you that, you know, it's very powerful what you say, what everybody's saying here this evening, and we will take that back.
Thank you. Can I, Councillor Wilmore?
Thank you. Disconnect is the word that I had written down here, and I won't labour it because Councillor Lamb has done it very articulately. But I work in the NHS, so I work in a very large organisation, and I know that what is the perception at director level is often very different to the perception on the ground. And it's not until we have a director come to a department to see a fly-infested, you know, pipe that's full of fat, or a ward that is fallen to pieces, until they actually see what's going on. So, you know, I'm sure there are members here who would gladly invite you into their homes for them to see the state of their properties and ask yourself, would you live in that property with your children? And let that be the guiding factor for your decision making. But the other question I wanted to ask was about the Community Wellbeing Award, because I sensed the ripple across the room when that was mentioned, and I do sort of question how well known that is by your residents. And, you know, in Natasha's case, she's had to, at her own expense, replace her beds and her sofas and all the rest of it. Should a platform officer not have proactively reached out to her and made her aware that there was a fund there that could be used to. Yeah. So again, I would suggest that there's maybe either a sort of lack of awareness or lack of promotion of that fund, because the people who need to use it are not, it would seem, aware of it.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank
Claire,
thank you. I certainly will take your comments back about the promotion of the Wellbeing Fund. Just for the benefit of people who are here this evening, it is available. There's a page on our website that gives information about our Wellbeing Fund. We also put it into previous correspondence, for example, our newsletters to customers, contact details, and our colleagues, our teams who are working with customers do make regular referrals through to both the Sustainable Tenancies team and also through to the Wellbeing Fund as well. So we don't always reach every single customer, but where we can, we will, and we'll do another round of promotion in relation to that as well. Okay.
Thank you, Claire. Just want to, before I move on to Councillor Lawrence, and just reiterate that disconnect point. I mean, it does feel that some of the information doesn't get through to the right people, and the right people don't get the right information, hence why we're seeing a lot of these cases here before us in terms of that. And I really want to do an invite to the board members that you're held accountable to come and do a ward walk with us, come and talk to some of these customers, come and see them for first hand, so they just get a picture of what's coming to us in terms of that. You know, I've offered it to Marion before in terms of an open arm, let's reset this relationship. But I've had cases which really railed me going from October last year, which still haven't been resolved. These are, you know, going October last year, and they've been going on for a year, and this was a broken window. These are the everyday small things that people see, you know, a broken light in the courtyard, a gate not fixed, a broken window that's been there, that degrades the area and brings it down. And that's the message that I want to kind of continue, because these are the everyday things that just drive people that are living in your properties over the edge, because they see it day in, day out. That hasn't been resolved. So this is an open invite to your board members to come and see us what we're facing here in Worcester, and let's start getting these issues resolved. Councillor Lawrenson.
Excuse me, can I just respond to that, Councillor Riaz? I would want to assure you that our board members do come out and do meet with our customers. Our chair has actually been very regularly into Worcester City and met directly with customers. And also, one of the things that I do is I do go out with my teams. I started as a housing officer in 1988 and worked for many years as a housing officer. And to be honest with you, I really miss that contact that I had with customers, because that was a really rewarding part of my job. So I just want to assure everybody that at all levels in platform, people are going out and spending time. I know Alan spends time with operatives, going out and speaking with customers directly. That's a really important thing for us to do.
Thank you, Claire, and I'll come back to that one again. And I've obviously, since the inception of Fortis and the WCH and the transformations that you've gone into, we used to have members on your board, you understand, and there used to be community representatives on your board, and they've all disappeared. So that's what I'm talking about, the disconnect that connected you from an accountability point with your local council, with the members of the public, and then to your board. All those layers of accountability and transparency and feedback have disappeared. Hence why we are getting the brunt of these queries here this evening over the number of years. So I just want to put that across. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we've just been told from platform about board members going to properties makes the criticisms we've already heard even more damning, because it demonstrates that the board members going to properties and then reporting back, presumably to HQ, hasn't made any difference. So it is great that board members are going to properties, but what's the ripple effect from those visits? And I'm saying this as someone who works for a very large housing organisation, and on a daily basis experiences the disconnect at times between the glitzy HQ and the living conditions of the residents. So I'm speaking from someone who does site visits themselves for a housing organisation, and obviously as a councillor. So this is in two parts. One is a complaint from a resident in St Stephen Ward. So I represent St Stephen Ward with Councillor Mace. just to make the point that these issues aren't just for Rainbow Hill or other wards that have already been mentioned. So I'm going to mention a complaint verbatim sent to me by email, and I'm also going to end with a question in relation to Awab's law under the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023. I almost don't want to mention this complaint because you've had a battering tonight, and it's been the most uncomfortable meeting I've sat in this venue over the last 13 years. But I think deservedly so, because for me, in my head, platform equals unaccountability. And that's a reputation that's been won in, 6 years since the merger. And I'm basing... And you guys are already on the ropes here, and I feel bad for adding to that, but I feel that I'd be not fulfilling my duty if I wasn't saying what I'm saying now. So anyway, the complaint, word for word. I'm very frustrated Platform do not ever move from their position of logging everything online and do not empathise with our fears and concerns. Even the police have the anonymous Crime Stoppers telephone line, which relates to Councillor Barnes's point. I feel Platform do not care about their neighbours at all. What if I couldn't get online access? They don't seem to have an answer for anyone non-tech savvy. This is a complaint I've made against this council, by the way. You know, not everyone has a mobile phone. All I asked for was the team at Platform to contact, this is about antisocial behaviour, all I asked for the team at Platform to contact the residents and have a gentle word with them regarding their behaviours and impact. I felt confident if they thought their tenancies could be affected, they might keep the noise down and smoke cannabis inside their homes rather than in the garden. I'm not sure what else to suggest. My neighbours and I feel unseen/unheard by Platform. And that's one complaint. That's part one. Part two is the question about Awab's law, and this is me trying to be constructive because I don't just want to whinge. I'm here for progress. That's why I come to these meetings, not just to moan, but to see change. So under the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023, social housing providers have to, adhere to Awab's law, so which means they have to address damp and mould issues that pose a significant risk of harm to residents within a set timescale, which is to be specified within the regulations. And finally, social landlords will also have to address emergency repairs as soon as possible, but no longer than 24 hours. So to end, my question to Platform is, will you be seriously and in an organised fashion notifying residents of their rights under the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023, rather than them, as it seems to be a pattern, them finding out accidentally what their rights might be? Will you, as a matter of course, between now and October, when the Awab's law comes into being, be notifying every single one of your residents what their rights are, so that those repairs are dealt with within a 24-hour period maximum for emergencies and within a set timescale for all other repairs? I don't want to come back to this meeting, as Councillor Lamb said, with a glitzy presentation, people looking at the floor going, we tried, we sent the board out to the sites. Because I might as well just resign, because I've made no difference tonight. So please, can you assure me that that question will lead to some progress? Will you be notifying residents of their rights under Awab's law? Thank you for bearing with me, everyone else.
Yeah, we will do an awareness raising campaign. We will absolutely commit to that.
I can add to that as well.
Yeah, quickly, because I was much longer than I thought I would be. Sorry about that. Will, between now and the next presentation next year, will this council be notified of the progress towards that? Will we see some tangible evidence that residents have been notified of their rights?
Yeah, we will keep you briefed and updated on that.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. And Councillor Mace, and then I've got Councillor Teixeira. And is there anybody else to speak? So I want to bring this item to a close. Councillor Barnes and Rudge.
Okay, thank you. I want to particularly say thank you to Tony, Peter and Kat and Natasha for coming to speak this evening. It was really powerful to hear your testimonies. And I think my day job is a software engineer, and I know that something can be working perfectly for the vast majority of my users, If there's some problem that's affecting a small number of them, I will hear a lot about it, and there will be a lot of noise made about it. And I think that, for me, is where we talk about disconnect and you know, people who the stories, especially about the mould and the asbestos, those are extremely concerning that they are not. Those exceptions are not being picked up. And I think the response that I got to the issues I sent in that I've been dealt with platform kind of speaks to the examples that the problems that people have seen. Because I had 2 issues that I sent in, and the responses to both of them contain something like this. So, we have followed our policies and procedures. Legal enforcement is in place and is being adhered to. And for the second one, we have investigated the allegations alongside the police and followed our policy and procedure. Now, without knowing what your policy and procedure is, that's a fairly meaningless statement to me. Your policy, for all I could know, it's good to say do nothing and you follows it. And I'm sure it doesn't say that, and I'm sure in most cases it does the job. But these are, for the first issue, this is something that was passed on to me by my predecessor in this role, and it's still not resolved now. And the basic problem, I think, is essentially comes down to the property that those residents are in is not suitable for them. One of the persons in a wheelchair. It's on a terrace house that has an extremely narrow pavement with a step, and that, I think, leads to a lot of issues in the area. And you know, I don't know what we can do to get it picked up by exception. You know, I'm sure the policies and procedures work in the vast majority of cases, but it's how do we get something escalated to be picked up so that it is dealt with properly, as Councillor Lamb alluded to. When people are going to their councillors, they're in a desperate state, and if we can be the trigger for that, then that'd be absolutely great. I take the point about that's been raised about we only have emails, and indeed the presentation just says call or email customer feedback. It doesn't have a particular person we can call to say, you know, deal with this problem. So I think that's the thing that we need to see improvement on, and because I do get the feeling that platform, although it has a lot of contributions to the economy and employs a lot of people, it's to the point where it's not accountable to these councils. And that was something we had previously when it was either council-owned homes or Worcester Community Housing. And I think we need to return to that accountability. I do want to shout out, though, there is one person I've dealt with at Platform, which is Zoe Truman, who I have a phone number for, who does accept my phone calls, and if she doesn't accept my phone calls, ring me back very, very quickly, and I have a very good experience with Zoe, but that's the exception rather than the rule. So that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that feedback, and I'll make sure that Zoe gets that feedback. Thank you. Happy to pick up the detail of that particular issue with you. So we'll get in touch with you to talk through that and look at why the situation is as it is, and whether or not there's any other progress that can be made.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor De Serra, and then Councillor Barnes, and then Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just touch on the, I hope you were suggesting a partnership, a renewed efforts partnership around fly tipping and dealing with it, because about 2.5 years ago I tried to get this going. I just tried it for it in Warndon, you know, because of all the fly tipping around there. 4 different lots of vehicles could drive past it because it's not on their land, which is ludicrous. So I tried to get some sort of cooperation going, you know, a way if someone picks it up, maybe City Council picks it up and charges back depending on where it is. I don't know how the logistics might work. Anyway, it sort of fell apart. Nobody had any appetite for it, apparently, at Platform. So if you now do have an appetite for it, truly delighted. 2 things to add. Can we also have some concerted cooperation on recycle rates, because it's very poor in lots of places in Worcester, and it's one reason why the bins, I think, get very filled up. The wrong things are going in the wrong places. I've asked the City Council if they can produce some nice big signs on the bins at the request of Joe Kelly. I don't know, I haven't had an answer for that yet. But I think also education is going to be needed, and it's happened sporadically, but I wonder if we can have something a little bit more concerted. And now I'm going to have to do another moan. I'm sorry. I asked if the bins at Cranham Parade shops could be enlarged. I think it's a pretty straightforward request. I sent multiple photographs in of all of them overflowing with rubbish going down Honister Drive and the rest of Cranham Parade, making it look a terrible mess. I'm not asking that they get emptied more often. I know that would be very expensive to do. I'm only asking for bigger bins, but the first answer I got back was, no, there are enough bins. Well, there aren't enough bins. I'm sorry, it's not right. There aren't enough capacity anyway. Then I've got another answer today telling me that they've looked at it again. They still think that there is enough capacity. There truly isn't, and I don't see how Platform wouldn't want to fix this problem by just making those bins a bit larger, exactly where they are. And it would help with the general littering, and fly tipping would be hopefully less prevalent if people think the area is cared for. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. You're a big organisation, but there are big stories. No, we hear stories about lifts being out of order for months, water not being available in blocks of flats for 24 hours, doors broken so criminals can get in and terrorise people within buildings. It's interesting that one of the comments on the water story today in Worcester News is you being described as slum landlords. And I think that's unfair, but I think there is a certain justification in it if you don't get your house in order. And I think you really need to think about your reputation and how you are supporting your residents so that you don't get that moniker on a long-term basis. Because that would be a shame. And also, it brings the whole social housing into disrepute. People don't want to be considered to be living in a building that's owned by a slum landlord. And we have enough private ones of those in this city. We really don't want social ones as well. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for your presentation. This is not my field of expertise, so I'm talking really as a layperson, but I'm very interested in listening to the concerns made by residents. And one of the things that strikes me is that when I look at your graphs, most of the issues are physical. You know, you've got figures on windows and doors and roofing and tiles and painting and cleaning and all sorts of things. But it seems to me that a number of issues raised this evening are to do with behaviour, and antisocial behaviour in particular. Drug use or misuse was one of them. And I do wonder whether your policies are robust enough on that front, and whether you feel you can reassure people that it is something that's in hand, that it's something you've got a grip on, or whether you feel it's something you can't control and you don't quite know what to do with. That would be very useful to know. Thank you.
I can respond to that. So we have an extremely robust process for managing antisocial behaviour. And my mantra is the facts will always lead the way within the confines of the legislation process. So the neighbourhood officers are very proactive in their communications with customers, and often, for various reasons, we're not able to take action. I'm generalising here, but where we can, we will not shy away from taking action. Sometimes it can take us a long time because we're in the hands of the courts, and I'm sure everybody knows that there are lots and lots of delays in terms of court enforcement action, but we've had a number of successful outcomes. There are some things that the courts will not give us possession for, and one of it is cannabis use. I'm sure you all know that the police do not see this as a priority for them. We work very, very closely with all key stakeholders, social services. We work very closely with the police to make sure that we are proactively managing reports of antisocial behaviour and any concerns that come from the community. But I have to be frank, on occasion there are things that we cannot deal with through the courts, or it will take a long time to deal with them through the courts. But we will not shy away from any tenancy breaches. And we have I think Councillor Mace has mentioned about Zoe Truman today, and the dedication from that community safety officer and the work that they have done to deal with things with care and compassion, but to not shy away from difficult decisions. And I want to give that reassurance to everybody today regarding the way in which we manage our legal enforcement and tenancy breaches.
Thank you. That concludes the session this evening. And I personally thank you for coming here this evening. Well, I think everybody said a fair amount in terms of that. I mean, similarly, we haven't got much power to hold you accountable, but we do have the power to enforce. We do have the power to enforce properties that aren't in a fit and proper state, and rest assured we will be pursuing those if we find any breaches on that side. I didn't want it to come to this in terms of that, but there are obviously cases out there that we feel that might meet that threshold. Our residents have spoken this evening in terms of the issues that they're facing. It's not an easy job. There are really good officers you have on the ground level, and that has to be acknowledged, that are holding up the reputation at a grassroots level. Paul Edwards, I can obviously mention in terms of that, and others have mentioned other names in terms of that are doing a really, really good job, but they are far and few between, and then that disconnect really needs to be sorted. And hopefully this gives you an opportunity to take back a lot of the feedback and hopefully come back and address those situations. So I'll bring this meeting to a close. If you are able to meet with some of the residents outside in the foyer, that'll be really greatly appreciated to deal with some of those issues. And I thank you for the person who had it. It hasn't been easy, but really appreciate you being able to hear today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to take a 5-minute break, if that's possible, and Thank you, ladies and gentlemen and councillors. We are going back to agenda item 6, Worcester City Housing Enabling Strategy 6-monthly update. I'll take this report as read. So I will open it up to the floor. Are there any questions or comments, please? Councillor Mace.
Yeah, so I think point three refers to the project we are working on to build some houses. I just wanted to raise that I'm really keen to see those houses meet the passive house standard and be an example of the houses we want to see built. So, you know, efficient, have solar power, heat pumps installed and everything, just as good as they can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, point 3.3. Emergency. Yeah. Yes, and obviously everything we're looking to build, we are looking for exempt for accommodation because we're not going to be building lots of housing. And I think in a previous report to Capital Board, we said, for us, it has to be something special and specific because, the cost to us and the viability for us. So we will be looking very close to ecological standards, be it passive home or certainly some sort of net zero type of accommodation anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm trying to get my breath back after that. Page 3, 3.11. There's a mention in the report about a local authority housing fund grant for refugees and homeless households under the government's resettlement programme, and that is part of the new provision. Do we know how big a part of the new provision those households form? And just to add that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first sort of explicit acknowledgement that this does have an impact on housing. So I'm expressing gratitude that we are seeing this in this report. The question is, how big a chunk of the new housing is that related to a local authority housing fund?
It's always going to be small because the amount of grant funding we receive is quite small. This financial, we've already got 2 properties tenanted at the moment that come on stream this year, and we're hoping to complete on 2 more this financial year. We've got additional grant funding that we didn't have before for the next financial year, which will deliver us another 5 units, sorry. So we should have 9 units by the end of next financial year through Local Authority Housing Fund 1, Local Authority Housing Fund 3. Obviously, with the budget announcement, we're hoping for the scheme will continue. And because the grant rate is relatively generous for us and we can make it work, we're generating surpluses quite early on, then we will generate an overall surplus. So we're starting from quite a small base, but we're getting to the stage in a few years' time where we can cross-subsidise ourselves in terms of surplus rent. So yes, we are starting small, but if we can deliver 6 or 7 every year, it's of great benefit.
Carry on.
Thank you. Just one more, unrelated to that. So page 4, 3.14, there's mention of an affordable housing development group. And to quote, it's proven a very useful place to discuss and resolve any barriers or issues affecting the delivery of affordable housing. So what are the barriers that have been discussed in that affordable housing development group? And I guess I don't want to just assume what they are. No. And is there any overlap between that group, which appears to be a new group, and the existing registered provider liaison group?
The Affordable Housing Working Group is a group was set up before I arrived, maybe a year before I arrived, and it's an internal group to the council, so we will claim head of planning, head of estates, 2 corporate directors, housing obviously, legal and finance. So we deal with some of the internal blockages to delivery, and also we flag up what potentially we're looking at. So it's useful for us to have a set period to get down and talk among ourselves about, this, for example, we got a site here, a site there, or some of the things that are potentially restricting development. the registered provider liaison group is a senior group looking at, with platform, rooftop, and our main house, Bromford, our main housing providers in the city, and that's a bit more of a strategic group. That group is obviously, we've been through this about the difficulties with Section 106 sites and sort of pushing forward on deliver, and we've had a couple of Section 106 sites that have been registered provider driven that have been significantly delayed. So that tends to deal with that bigger picture type stuff. We also deal with the management stuff there as well. And obviously, from tonight, but we'll deal with sort of strategic management allocations as well. So those are the two groups.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Amos.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a question on the first part of paragraph 3.11, where it says, part of this new provision within Worcester has been the acquisition of homes via the Local Authority Housing Fund grant for refugees and homeless households under the government's resettlement programme. Could I just ask how many properties have there been and how many residents are there in them?
In terms of the let properties, we have under Local Authority Housing Fund 1, we've acquired 2 properties. One of the properties has a woman and her child in it. Second property has a family of 5, 2 adults, 3 children. And in terms of those are the properties we have let at the moment. In terms of the properties coming up, we're acquiring a 2-bedroom property and we're acquiring a 4-bedroom property. So they will, it will be a, 3-4 person household for the 2-bed, and it will be a 5-6 person household for the 4-bed.
Thank you. If I just follow that up briefly, Chair, I don't wish to straddle agenda items because it might come up subsequently, but I might as well ask you now. Is there a similar scheme for Worcester people where, buying up houses and rehousing seems obviously an eminently sensible thing to do beyond the normal building of affordable housing and so on? Is there a similar scheme?
Yes, I mean, the Local Authority Housing Fund, it has 2 strands to it. One is the resettlement for Afghan nationals who've been granted leave to remain here for working for the British forces, etc., that type of thing, but also for homeless households who would qualify for a local connection for Worcester. So, in fact, probably around half of them will be going to homeless households who will have a Worcester connection. And that can either be temporary accommodation, or it can be someone who is, or a household that is, we would accept as homeless, and this is their route to rehousing. So it will be permanent housing.
Thank you. You just preempted my third and final question, so thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments or questions? Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's great to see, the council has still got a very firm commitment to affordable housing. I've always believed that everyone should have the right and aspiration to own their own home if that's what they choose. But obviously, the strategic context within which we're doing this is shifting. The central government, Keir Starmer's government, has said that it wants to tear up the existing planning laws. They see it as an engine of growth, and they've also got some very, very ambitious plans to sort of build more housing, more affordable housing across the whole country, which is to be welcomed. And from what I read today, there's almost the idea that some of councillors' powers to resist or to block developments that they might not want to see will be taken away, and that will be centralised. Now, I'm in 2 minds about that because I'm not a believer in the centralisation of power, but I realise also that sometimes people can be NIMBYs. They can want to not have housing in their particular areas. I don't think we're like that in Worcester particularly, but I'm wondering if you've got any comments about how you feel moving forwards, with these changes in planning to make it probably easier to enforce new housing developments, possibly sometimes against the will of local councillors, how that will impact on, you know, our ability to meet our targets. And it's also worth saying as well that the problem with the government's housing ambition is that the levers are still in the hands of the private sector. You know, the council doesn't actually build houses as such. It's still about the private sector. It's still about us enabling it as a council. And from what I read, one of the problems with building lots more houses, it's a nice aspiration, but there's simply a shortage of people in the building industry to actually, there isn't the capacity. We're going to have to train hundreds and thousands more builders, plumbers, brickies, etc., in order to meet that. And my second question is just a sort of point of information. This is very interesting about sleeping pods and homeless pods. You know, can you just sort of explain those a little bit and where they would be and how that works as well? Because I'd be interested in that as well.
Yeah, I'll take your first question. You're quite right. I mean, the government has ambitions, and sometimes there is this idea that planning is the obstacle. It may be the case in some areas that you know, there's a lot of local pressure against development, but developers know how to deal with that, and you know, they'll go to appeal if they need to, and they'll factor that into their timescales. But you're quite right, it's not the only stop for development. We simply don't have the workforce to build the ambitions that the government has. Now, that's not to say that the government doesn't have a skills and training strategy that will address that, and some of the modern methods of construction are less labour intensive, and if they're going down that direction, they may acquire more. And there's lots of other things that hold up development. For example, you know, highways, you know, some developments are held up because, you know, there needs to be a new roundabout put in place, and, you know, timetabling on that slips. Things like infrastructure in terms of road infrastructure, but also in terms of services infrastructure, you know, getting things attached to the grid. We've got to put big mains in, getting it attached to the grid. And there are so many things that hold up development aside from the planning side. And I'm not a planner, but I know plenty of planners who will argue we're giving the permissions. When you talk about the 5-year supply, we have a 5-year supply of permissions. It's just that nobody's building them out. So I think there is a point that there's perhaps too many consultees on some developments, but it's certainly, I agree, it's not the only thing holding up development, and the key thing is about the actual people who are going to build the things, because there simply aren't enough tradesmen out there, or tradespeople, sorry, I should say. In terms of your second point, the pods are really looking at, I mean, we've got some fairly entrenched rough sleepers in the city, and you know, there's a risk to themselves, not the least, because they're in quite visual areas sometimes, and in the middle of the night, on a Saturday night, it can be risky. We want to provide alternatives for people. There's two types. The type of pod you put up and take down, that on a cold night, somebody can just go and turn up, and it's somewhere for them to go. And then there's the semi-permanent pods that will provide people a bit more secure accommodation over a period of time before they move into temporary accommodation. In terms of siting it, that's something we'll be looking at, working with partners to actually identify some sites where we could. Obviously, we'll have to speak to planning, where there won't be permanent structures, but may need temporary permission, etc., depending on what we put up. So probably looking about 5 or 6 throughout the city, a mix of sort of put up, take down, a nights like this where we're, you know, cold in March, but also perhaps something where it's a feeder to another development that's already there. So we can perhaps take people who need a bit of support that aren't best suited to going into sort of, you know, shared accommodation, and then we can work with those people to move them into more settled temporary accommodation and on their pathway. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Amos, I'll take you as the last speaker on this item.
Thank you, Chair. It was just really following up that point about pods. I didn't know what a pod was now, but I think I do know what a pod is. But could you just have a little bit more detail in terms of, obviously, because they're not permanent structures, they won't require planning permission. But obviously, somebody will need to decide where they go. And I would suspect that they will need some kind of supervision or monitoring as to who goes in or what goes on inside when they're in. I'm not saying that we don't want somebody standing outside them, but clearly, if it's a hub for people who are homeless, there may be issues, there may not be. But I mean, has that been thought about?
Yeah, I mean, that's moving into the area of management. That's not really my area, but we're working with, obviously, Tom and Rosie Badham to look at that side of things, to look at a site that's suitable, where there's sufficient oversight throughout the night. I mean, at the moment, we have that situation where we're not, well, people are sleeping on the street, sleep effectively where they want. So it's about security for the street homeless person as well, but also somewhere where there will be some oversight about what's happening there, you know, some security surveillance. That'll be one of the elements that we'll be looking at in terms of a particular site. And it won't be like a development site, it'll be a small site where we could perhaps, you know, fit in, you know, potentially in a property we own or something like that. So yeah, that is part of the equation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Amos, and obviously they would have to be accessible and reachable to the people that they're designed to do. So you know, you can, you know, take a genius in terms of the locality where we're probably looking in terms of that, although no sites has been decided on that. But obviously I welcome the commitment to help focus on homelessness, despite the negative press that we've been getting lately in and around homelessness, that actually our offices are working extremely hard and we're investing more, and I believe that there should be some more good news coming in the coming days in terms of our homelessness commitment. And also, obviously, in this report, it highlights our commitment to obviously start building or start owning or start enabling some development that we can call our own to tackle some of those issues that you mentioned, Councillor Amos, and it's been my ambition for the last 2.5 years. It's taken this long to get to this stage. Hopefully, in the next committee cycle, we should see a report before you that realises some of that vision. Okay, so this report was for noting, wasn't it? So are we all happy to note it? Thank you. It's noted. And agenda item 7, private sector housing service annual report. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. So this report is the annual update which outlines the activity of the private sector housing team. It covers a period 1st of January to the 31st of December last year, so the calendar year. It's broken down into a number of sections, so I'll try and provide a brief overview of each of those sections, and obviously if there's any questions that anybody wants to ask, I'll endeavour to answer those. First section surrounds discretionary DFG top-up approvals. So as members will be aware, the Council has a statutory responsibility to deliver mandatory disabled facilities grants. In addition to that, we have the opportunity to top up mandatory grants, which are of a limit of £30,000, to provide additional funding, essentially, to enable larger works to be undertaken. Typically, grants that require a top-up are more complex. They're generally extensions or conversions of properties. The majority of DFGs can be done within the £30,000 mandatory grant limit, so level access showers, stair lifts, things like that. Due to projected budget pressures and a forecasted overspend that we anticipated last year, a paper was brought to this committee recommending the temporary suspension of discretionary top-up grants to enable us to ensure that we could meet our mandatory requirements to deliver the mandatory DFG grants. Since that point, a number of actions and work's been undertaken, which has involved establishing a panel to review discretionary top-up grants. We made the commitment to review all of the discretionary cases that were already within the system, given that there'd already been a commitment or they'd been progressed for some time. We've now concluded all of those cases that have been reviewed. 20 were reviewed during the course of the past 8 months or so. what we found was that not all of those cases required a discretionary DFG top-up. 8 were approved, 6 were refused, 3 didn't require discretionary funding and they could be met within the mandatory grant. One of the cases was cancelled by the Occupational Therapy Service, and we do have 2 which are currently ongoing, still going through the process. In addition to the panel, a new approach to assessing discretionary cases has been established. So at the point of application, when it's received by the Home Improvement Agency, if it's identified that it's likely to be a larger case that may require discretionary top-up funding, a new process has been established to bring all parties together at the early opportunity to identify what the most appropriate course of action is, so whether that requires a discretionary application or whether there's alternative options available to that household to meet their needs. One of the recommendations on the report today is, as a result of us being able to address some of the challenges that we had and didn't have in operation when we brought the report last year, is to remove the temporary suspension on issuing discretionary DFG top-up grants. There are still significant pressures on the budget around disabled facilities grants, but we would consider cases on a case-by-case basis, essentially, but we don't feel there's a need to have a sort of blanket approach to the suspension of discretionary cases. I'll briefly mention the Home Upgrade Grant 2 project. So this is essentially the Green Homes Grants project that's been operating over the past couple of years. We've provided reports to this on this to the Environment Committee, which is where it sat constitutionally. But just to advise really that we had challenges around delivery of the scheme, largely due to the conditions of the scheme solely related to off-gas properties, so properties that didn't have gas central heating, of which in Worcester there were limited numbers of applicants, and there were a number of other grant conditions which wasn't particularly conducive to the makeup of the stock in Worcester. We're now due to embark on the next scheme, which is the Warm Homes Local Grants Scheme. On this occasion, it's going to be delivered by Worcestershire County Council on behalf of the city. There's some greater economies of scale in doing so. They've been operating the scheme on behalf of other local authorities in the county for the past couple of years. The role that the City Council will play moving forward will be around making sure that it's promoted and that scheme is able to be accessed by residents in the city. So we want to make sure we maximise access and use of the new scheme moving forward, and the conditions are much more favourable to the stock in Worcester. I won't labour the point around the stock condition survey. We obviously brought a report in January to this committee around the stock condition survey. There's an all-member briefing in January, and the nature and contents of the survey has helped to inform the private sector housing strategy, which again came back to this committee in January. So very much looking forward to embedding that work and using that data to inform the activity of the private sector housing team moving forward. We also brought a paper to the last committee around additional licensing. Of note, we've done a lot of work over the past 12 months around Section 257 HMOs. So they are HMOs that don't have the relevant building regulation certificate. So it doesn't meet building regulations and were converted pre-1991. So these are properties that many of which are a very good condition and don't cause any issues, but some can be very poor and have a very poor standards. So we've been doing some proactive work to try and identify properties that are Section 257s that don't have a licence, to ensure that they are licensed or that they have a regulation certificate to ensure that they're at the required and safe standard. In terms of property standards enforcement, as members are likely to be aware, we receive a number of service requests directly into the team. A lot of those are generated and referred through member inquiries and casework. During the course of the year, we had 122 service requests, so they're where it's an inquiry or which is sort of formally logged on the system that we can't resolve just through a sort of general telephone conversation. That surrounded 57 around property standards complaints and 87 HMO licensing issues. We undertake a range of actions, so we obviously undertake enforcement action, which is outlined at 7.6 in the report. But a lot of what the private sector housing team do is sort of informal interventions. So that's speaking to landlords, sometimes directly just to get an issue resolved. Obviously, if that issue isn't resolved informally, then we would escalate that through formal interventions. Of the 26 inspections that were undertaken using the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, we identified 15 Category 1 hazards in properties. They're the most severe deficiencies in properties, but they do range. There's a broad range of what those related to. Each of those cases, we have a duty to undertake formal enforcement action. So they led to notices being issued, either improvement notices or hazard awareness notices, and they remain in force until the issues have been resolved. And there's escalation processes if they don't get resolved. We also identified 30 Category 2 hazards, which are less severe, though still are of concern. Typically, damp and mould would be a Category 2 hazard. Obviously, we've heard around some of the challenges around damp and mould earlier. Only the most severe cases of damp and mould would constitute a Category 1 hazard. For Category 2 hazards, we have a power rather than a duty to undertake enforcement action. Often we can resolve it without the requirement to undertake enforcement action, but it is a tool that we have available, and we will use that where required. It's worth also mentioning that we investigated and successfully prosecuted a managing agent for illegally evicting their tenant from a licensed HMO. So that creates pressure around homelessness, and it's an important message that we will take that enforcement action if landlords or the managing agents don't act appropriately and safeguard their tenants. Empty homes, obviously it's been raised at this committee a number of times, and we do undertake investigations into empty homes, but it is a particularly challenging area of work and highly resource intensive to seek resolutions. The work of the private sector housing team specifically involves writing out to properties that have been empty for 1 year or over. And during the course of the last year, we sent out 547 letters to owners of empty properties. We get a relatively low response rate to those letters, as you might imagine, so we only had an 11% response rate. But we did have 400 of those properties that were wrote to did come back into use. So we can't necessarily directly correlate that to our letter being sent out around intervention, but we do track those and to see what the outcome of those properties are. So quite frequently properties are empty and they are brought back into use. It just takes time for a variety of reasons. We also respond to concerns raised about empty properties. So if they're a detriment to the neighbourhood, the powers generally relate to planning enforcement. So we work closely with planning enforcement around resolving those, and particularly problematic properties are referred into our problem property group, which is an internal group from a number of officers across the authority, to look at how we can work collectively using the various different pieces of legislation available to different teams to resolve those issues. Of the 42 complaints about empty properties that we received, of the properties that we received, 42 were empty property cases were closed as having been occupied, and that was as a direct result of council intervention. We have 35 remaining live empty property cases open, though the severity or concern around those is relatively low. So we rate all empty properties on a scale of significance or severity of concern. So looking forward to the next 12 months, we have the implementation of the new additional licensing scheme, which will take effect in September this year. So that will be a citywide scheme. During the course of the implementation of that scheme, we will receive a significant proportion of renewals and license applications. So that will take a significant resource from the team and will take some time to process. So one of our performance indicators surrounds the timescales around licensing. We anticipate during that quarter that will slightly dip. So that's forewarning, but that's just surely the volume that we receive because of the new scheme being implemented. There's various pieces of the legislation which will have a direct impact on the work of the private sector housing team, so particularly the Renters' Rights Bill and the Supported Accommodation Act. These are quite significant pieces of legislation which will impact the private rented sector in particular, as well as supported accommodation. So there's additional powers and duties placed on local authorities to undertake inspections, regulation, enforcement, and obviously additional requirements placed on landlords in the private rented sector. We're still waiting for further information to come out. The consultation on the Supported Accommodation Act has now been published, and we're awaiting details of what that means for the authority and the team. I mentioned around the Warm Homes local grant. That scheme we've just received notification of the award yesterday. So we'll be working with County Council around the delivery of the scheme moving forward. We also recognise the importance the private rented sector has on the health and well-being of residents in the city. So the quality of people's housing has a direct impact on their health and well-being. What we're really keen to do, we've mentioned it a few times at this committee, around the ability for the council to intervene with property standards issues. What we want to do is to encourage people to report any concerns that they have to the team for us to be able to investigate and to take action where it's required. So a significant focus of the team over the next 12 months will be around promotion. So that we're going out to communities where we receive low numbers of complaints, press releases, attending events, and just trying to raise awareness of the team to encourage people to report concerns to us. And that's me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for that comprehensive report. Can I open it up to the floor? Councillor Wilmore, Barnes, Lawrence and Mace, Holmes and Amos.
Thank you. There are 2 points I'd like to make, if I may, in a question. I think it's just to remember that that temporary suspension of the DFG was made to protect the Council's ability to fulfil its statutory obligations to deliver mandatory grants. Facing a shortfall, this was a prudent decision, and this Council will always have financial sustainability as a core pillar of its decision making. Secondly, what's really worth highlighting is that in addition to successful budget management, the team has innovated and had the creativity to do things differently and ultimately been able to deliver a better service that's now an exemplar of best practice for other district councils. And I'd like to make sure that this is acknowledged by the committee. My question is that once this round has been completed and those 8 grants plus maybe 2 more have been delivered, what is the ongoing position likely to be with the ability to be able to offer discretionary top-up grants?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we have budget pressures around disabled facilities grants. We receive an allocation of better care funding from government, so it's a direct award. It goes through county council, but it's protected for local housing authorities to enable us to deliver grants. It is challenging to forecast and plan because of the timescales that are involved with delivering DFGs. So things that are approved now, particularly larger scale works, can take quite some time to go through the system. What I would say is that we will be able to issue discretionary top-up grants, but what we're trying to do is to maximise the use of working with partners. So, for instance, with platform, where there's a platform property where they require a discretionary top-up, we'll speak to platform and say, can you contribute anything towards that? And they do contribute towards that, which minimises the amount of discretionary funding that we need to put into it. We'll speak to adult social care, children's services, charitable organisations, to see what contribution and what's required by the local authority. So there will be ongoing pressures. We will consider cases on a case-by-case basis. So I don't know if that offers the answer or sufficient reassurance, but it's difficult to provide a completely comprehensive response.
I think it's just reassuring to know that this council will always seek to provide that additional support when and wherever we can.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. Very much welcome the work on HMOs. I think that's a good step forward. My question is actually on empty houses under 8.13 and the premiums. I wonder whether they're big enough. 2 years goes to 150%, 5 years at 200%, 10 years 300%. Well, that's a long time for a property to be not serving its community. And in some cases, that will be selfish landlords who are just sitting there waiting for it to get into a bad state so that they can then redevelop the site or whatever. So I'm quite keen that we actually look at those figures if we can, to up them to make it more encouraging for people to actually offload property earlier if they can. And there will be cases, I know, legal disputes and so forth, where that may not be possible. But actually, the more we can bring back quicker by putting financial penalties in, the better, really. So I do think that those percentages may need to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, there is a fine line, isn't there? And we've been down this route before of trying to proactively putting a lot of resources in trying to moving empty properties back into that, and we've consistently found that the amount of effort that we put in and the amount of resources we put in, we're not getting that return back in terms of getting those properties back. So there is a fine line, obviously, in terms of enforcement stroke fines to get those properties back in. Tom, you can give me a brief answer regarding some of the problems that we face, but yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, on the empty property, the premium, council tax premium, I mean, I'm not an expert on council tax. It doesn't sit with me. My understanding is that the figures that are in the report are government set figures. I don't think they're necessarily locally decided. I think that's my understanding. What I do understand there to be, though, is that there's been some changes to what you can do. So at the moment we have the initial period of time is 2 years, and I think that's been reduced down to the ability for councils to decide to reduce that down to 1 year for the initial premium. And there's been changes around second homes. So second homes are where essentially they're empty, but there's furniture in them, so they're not used as somebody's main and principal home. So they won't be classified as empty homes and wouldn't ordinarily have attracted council tax premium, but there has been some changes around that. I know that we took a report, I think it's 2019 when these regulations came in through to Policy and Resources Committee, which I think is where decisions around council tax premiums sits. So I can take that away and discuss that with our finance team around the process for looking at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom, for a very detailed report and the verbal presentation as well. And also thanks to the private sector housing team for all that they do to improve property standards. Can't be easy. So a bit of a preamble, then 2 questions. So it says at 7.4 on page 4 that officers have undertaken 26 property inspections and identified 15 category 1 hazards. So to define category 1, the next sentence, these are severe deficiencies in the property which can adversely affect occupiers' health, such as a lack of heating, disrepaired staircases and broken windows. So those are 3 examples of a category 1. Now I think there are about 47,000 homes in Worcester. I don't know what the percentage is of those homes being private sector housing, but it's going to be thousands. In a BBC article July last year, the English Housing Survey found that 3.5 million households in England lived in a home that failed to meet a decent home standard, and 1 million households live with damp. A resident contacted me to say that following a Freedom of Information request, they found out that not one category 1 notice had been served on the 2022 properties that had been found to be a category 1 risk in 2015 private sector housing survey. Now I really ought to be quoting the most recent survey, but I'm sorry I haven't got those figures to hand. But I'm guessing that if 2,000 properties in a 2015 private sector housing in Worcester were found to be category 1, it's going to be a similar number in the most recent survey. And yet, only 26 properties have been given a category 1 out of those thousands. So surely there are more than 15 homes that are category 1 risk or category 1 hazard. So first question is, what can this council do to increase the number of inspections? I'm guessing the answer, but I'm asking the question anyway. And secondly, the government plans to abolish Section 21 notices, Section 21 no-fault evictions. So until now, people have been deterred from complaining because they think that they can get evicted if they complain. So will the government's plans to abolish no-fault eviction notices lead to an increase in complaints about shabby conditions? And will that lead to an increase in the resources within the private sector housing team? And again, I'm guessing the answer to that question, but I'm asking it anyway. So, Category 1 hazard homes, surely there are more. Can we increase inspections? We're going to get more complaints. Are we going to get more resources?
Yeah, thank you. So just clarity on the 2,000 homes from 2015 stock condition survey. So as was sort of described with the new stock condition survey, it's not necessarily based on there are 2,000 homes. It's done through a means of sort of data analysis to identify there could be up to that kind of figure. What we don't have as part of any stock condition survey is where those properties are or what those hazards are. So it's not something that we're able to directly respond to, if that makes sense. We can't go out and inspect those properties specifically because it's kind of extrapolated data. But I suppose in answer to your question, what we want to do is to give confidence to individuals to report to us. So we've done an awful lot to try and promote the service through press releases, through social media campaigns and things. But we do really recognise that the numbers that are reported to us are low, a lot lower than we would anticipate and hope, which prohibits the ability for us to identify those Category 1 hazards and to intervene. As part of the legislation, we require somebody to want to make a formal complaint to us. That can be done. It can be advocated on behalf of somebody else, so a member can advocate on behalf of a person, but we do need the consent of the tenant to do that, because there's a number of reasons why they may choose not to. And we have to give notice to the landlord, so we can't just respond. We can't go out and knock on doors and try and find hazards. We have to have a complaint, we have to give notice, and then we can undertake an inspection. So we are very keen to do the promotional activity, and that's what's built into the private sector housing strategy to look forward over the next 12 months is how can we get out there more, how can we let people know, and what assurance can we offer to tenants that they can come to us with, with confidence that we'll intervene and support them. On the second point, I think you're right that abolishing Section 21 is likely to lead to more complaints. Hopefully that might reduce some of the concerns of some residents who may choose not to report property standard issues for fear that there could be reprisals. We don't know, but I think anecdotally and sort of considering the likelihood that that's likely to increase, we understand that there will be some new burdens funding around the Renters Reform Bill. There's a range of additional responsibilities and powers for local authorities, both for that and for the Supported Accommodation Act. We're anticipating some new burdens funding to help support and the council in being able to respond robustly to those changes of legislation.
Thank you. Good news. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and I raised this exact point that you mentioned in around when the housing stock survey came up with the consultants. It is an extrapolation. It was more thorough examination that they'd done here in Worcester than they'd done anywhere else in terms of that. However, they couldn't identify which properties. It was a desktop exercise on an extrapolation of data. So that's the data we're missing. Hence why the need for tenants to come forward and have the confidence. And there's two elements to that, isn't it? The confidence, giving the confidence and the security and to the tenants that once they report it, something will be done about it, and B, that they'll be protected from any retaliation and recrimination from their existing landlords. So that's absolutely essential that the Rental Reform Act deals with those and that protect them, and it gives them the confidence to come forward. Hence, once that happens and once people realising that that protection is in place, we can then go out. That demand on our services will then increase as a result of it, and hopefully which is our aim here around this committee, and especially from our side, is to improve those standards and give the resources necessary to the City Council to be able to do that. Councillor Mace.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the hard work officers are putting in the last year in this area. I think we saw from the condition report at the last meeting that renting in the private sector can be really precarious for tenants, and the work that the team are doing to support those tenants is really important. I'm really glad to see the recommendation to end the temporary suspension of the discretionary DFG cases. It's really important that we are able to continue to support the most vulnerable with the most complex needs. It would be good, I think, if the national government could review the cap, because I don't think it's changed since the previous Labour government, so it's a very long time since it's been increased, so it would be good if that can be raised at some point. Section 4 on the Warm Homes Local Grant Programme, I certainly hope that's going to be a lot more successful than the HUG 2 scheme, which has, I know, a lot of very severe restrictions on it, because I understand the point that the Chair was getting at the budget debate about retrofitting of solar panels and heat pumps, etc., can be very expensive for some people to install, and programmes like the Warm Homes grants, I think it would be really important to make sure that those who can least afford it, but will benefit the most from a home that is cheaper to run, are able to access that. The one question I had is on exactly the same point that Councillor Barnes raised about the empty home premium. I'm fine if this is a written answer that comes back later. I'd like to understand what the maximum is and how soon we can apply it, because I think the government does set upper limits of what we can charge and when we can charge them, but it's up to councils to decide what to charge up to those limits. I'd like to understand what we're charging versus what's the maximum and how soon we can do it, so that we can consider that going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I can take that away. As I say, it's not my area of expertise around setting council tax premiums, but we can certainly take that point away and come back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but paragraph 8.1 there is a property that has been brought to my attention, and according to the next door neighbours, the house has been unoccupied for over 20 years. So my question, which is a variation, is how are we going to judge how long a property has been empty for? Can we take the affidavit of a next door neighbour? How do we evidence so we can start registering this house as unoccupied? It has got furniture in it. Unfortunately, the old lady died, and the son has done nothing with the property since. He just closed it up as a mausoleum. So it's a semi-detached property which has been deteriorating on an elderly couple, and they have been heating a cold wall and dealing with mess and the detritus of a deteriorating property. And when I raised this as a property, I was told it wasn't bad enough. And I can't go back to my resident and say 20 years of misery that you've lived through is not considered bad enough. So, also, you need to speak to Rachel. She already spoke to me, and she's very keen on using financial pressure to move empty houses. And from where she'd come from, I'm sure she will know how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest incentives for landlords that own a property which is sitting empty is financial pressure. I think that is a real valuable tool that we have, as well as any income that it generates for the council, which is obviously always welcome. So in terms of, so there's a range of different things that identify whether a property is empty. One of the things we will always do is to go and visit properties. So, it can be a really useful way of obviously just identifying whether it's empty, and we can track that over a period of time. So, and that is both from the private sector housing team as well as planning enforcement, so looking at it from slightly different perspectives. We use a grading scheme in the private sector housing team to rate properties around condition and severity, if there's any visible sort of property defects that may require intervention, and we'll use that as a means of prioritising, essentially, because progressing enforcement action against an empty property is a significant amount of work and can often not lead to the outcome that we would hope. So we take a sort of informed approach around what enforcement action we would do, whether that's the private sector housing team or another part of the authority. But if you wanted to send me the details of the specific property, we can look into that further.
Thank you, Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question on the approving the removal of the, reinstating the discretionary top-up grant. The report doesn't actually say what the budgetary implication of that is. There must be a budgetary implication of that, but can't find it in the report anywhere.
I mean, we don't have any, so we've dealt with all of the discretionary DFG cases that are in the system, if you like, that are in the process at the moment. So it would only relate to any new discretionary DFG grants that came forward into the future. What we can't provide is what that figure is. The Council's housing assistance policy sets a limit of up to £25,000 as a discretionary top-up award, so a total amount of £55,000 that can be awarded. But a lot of discretionary cases don't require the full amount. It could be that it's just over the mandatory grant limit. So it's very difficult to provide a direct financial figure around the implication of removing the discretionary grant, because it would depend on independent grants that come forward at some point in the future, how many of those there are, nature of the works that are required, etc.
So I think, Councillor,
Out of what budget does the money come then?
Yes,
I mean, central government grant or?
I think the question Councillor Amos is asking is, from the report, it's indicating that all of the discretionary grants hasn't been taken up. Is it the money that's not been spent that is being used to lift these, or is it new money that will be used in order to for the new cases that come on?
Yeah, I mean, all of the funding comes from the Better Care Fund for disabled facilities grants. So that's a grant award that the council receive essentially. So it doesn't add a budget pressure to the authority. The only implication is that we do have a statutory requirement to undertake mandatory DFGs. So if we got to the position that we couldn't meet the mandatory requirement, the mandatory DFGs, then it would either cause a budget pressure to the authority or create delays to those mandatory DFGs being undertaken. But what we don't want to do is to prohibit individuals that require that additional funding, where we have the ability to provide it, for the just in case. And what we feel we've got a really good process in place now to assess cases on a case by case basis. So it's a grant that we receive, and that would essentially be the limit that we'd be able to contribute towards.
So is it a new grant that we're receiving, or is it existing grant money that hasn't been spent?
It's an annual grant we receive. So I'm not sure of the question exactly. We receive an annual grant through the Better Care Fund. So within that grant allowance, we have to deliver mandatory DFGs, and we can choose to undertake a range of discretionary works.
It may be the hour, Chair, that I'm being a bit dense, but let me put the question in reverse. At the last budget discussion meeting of this committee, we decided to suspend the extra discretionary grant, obviously for budgetary reasons. We're now putting it back in, to which I have no objection, but I'm just wondering where the money is coming from, because the budget has been set. So this is additional too.
Got you. Sorry. No. Yeah. So one of the challenges we have around DFGs is forecasting. So what we looked at when we brought the report last year was how much we knew to be in the system and what it was looking like would be allocated within that financial year, so within the past financial year. From the forecasting that we undertook, what we knew was in the system and what would likely to need to be delivered within the course of the year, it would have been put us overspent. We wouldn't have been able to meet that. During the course of the year, we didn't realise the full amount that we had forecast or expected to have allocated. So essentially, it didn't put us into the position, and by limiting the amount of discretionary grants that we awarded or reviewing those on a case-by-case basis, it provided some protection from us being putting the council into an overspent position with that grant contribution for the course of the year.
So all of the money wasn't spent, hence allowing us to do the discretionary. That's the way I see it. So all the original money that was allocated for the money was allocated for cases because they didn't know the exact amount of the final figure of all the cases that they'd allocated for. That's come in less, which enabled us to lift the cap and to be able to offer discretionary ones.
Well, I think, Chair, I'm very happy with your explanation. I'm not sure I understand it, but clearly Mr Mountford's come up with an incredible system that central government will latch onto. You can spend more money, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. So I'll go along with that.
Okay. Do we have any other more questions or comments on this report? Okay. Is it for recommendation? Where are we? Noting. So this is noting and approving the removal of the temporary suspension of awarding the DFG top-up. All those in favour? Agreed. Agenda item 8, proposed committee performance scorecard. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Mace.
Sorry, everyone. I promise I'll be brief. So my main question I wanted to ask was, I understand health and wellbeing is planned to be scrapped for next year. Will their scorecard just be merged into likely communities or go somewhere else? And I'll try and get through the other points quickly. In the minutes for the previous meeting around the scorecard for percentage of antisocial behaviour inquiries solved in one calendar month, there was a discussion in that meeting about including the raw number of cases that were being dealt with so that we get more context of the percentage to see whether there's a lot of throughput in the system. And I think could we get those included in the scorecard and also reflect that on the other percentage cases, like percentage of successful homelessness preventions and relief outcomes, because I've seen some commentary that although we don't have any more homeless cases, we have it seeing higher throughput, and I think having those numbers would help make that clearer as we're looking at the performance indicators. And finally, on page 17, the number of affordable housing completions, we're suggesting reducing the target to 150. But in the report we saw earlier for the housing enabling strategy, point 3.10 there says we are looking at a pipeline of 227 affordable homes in 25-26. So I'm wondering if that target should remain the same as we have a pipeline that exceeds that 200 target already. Thank you.
Okay. Tom, you go first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, what I'd propose about the percentage performance indicators is that rather than having another set of performance indicators with the number, that the number is included within the commentary, so it refers back to that. So we did do some rationalisation around reducing the number of performance indicators, but I accept the point that percent, 100% of what. So we can include that in the commentary if that's acceptable. The number of affordable housing completions. So comparing two slightly different things. So the number of affordable housing completions that we report through the committee scorecard is and always has been solely within the boundaries of Worcester City. The figure that was quoted in the housing enabling strategy report relates to the urban extension areas as well. And I suppose it is a question the committee as to whether or not we want to continue to just report within, on the committee scorecard, those that are delivered within Worcester, or whether we report the figure that Worcester benefits from but includes the urban extension sites. I think we've had that discussion before, and it was always agreed that it would just be within Worcester, and that we would provide the commentary, any additionality within the urban extension sites. But that's the reason for the discrepancy. We are, it's still a bit of a stretch target, the 150 within Worcester City, but it's a bit more realistic, if I'm honest, than 200, because we aren't going to suddenly have homes built in the city within the next 12 months that we don't yet know about.
Okay, Councillor Lawrenson, Councillor De Serra, and then Councillor Amos, and then I'll call it quits.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question, or maybe two questions in relation to the first target. On page 1, number of community events supported. So we're aiming to put on the same number of events as the last financial year. But yet there's mention of reducing the team during 2025-2026. So what reduction in the team are we looking at, and what specific team are we looking at?
Yeah, so that would relate to grant-funded posts in the community engagement team. So we've been fortunate to have funding, sort of comp funding through County Council for work around asset-based community development. We've been able to stretch that beyond the point that we ought to have had them still in posts. So we've been able to maximise the length of time that we've had those posts, but that funding will be coming to an end during the course of this next 12 months. So that will lead to a reduction in capacity within the team. I was just going to quickly try and pull up the actual performance, but I think that from a recollection is that the performance around community events exceeded the target for last year. So ordinarily we'd push that target on, or maintain, stretch that to at least last year's delivery. But I think in reality, we know that if we're going to have a reduced capacity within the team, it's unlikely that we'll be able to meet that last year's delivery.
Thank you, Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question of, unless I've read it incorrectly, is it proposed to remove the target number of households on the waiting list? First of all, am I correct in that is the proposal, to remove that key indicator? It is. Well, can I ask why that is, Chair? Because obviously I know that not everybody on the housing waiting list is automatically eligible for housing. I accept that. The vast majority of people on the housing waiting list are never going to get anything anyway. I accept that. But what it does do, it is an indication of the state of the housing market in the city. And I think just to take that away, because I will always ask, what is the housing waiting list? Because it does tell us something. People put themselves on the waiting list for various reasons. If the waiting list is not going down and it keeps going up, then I would have questions. And it seems that we're very proud to publish that if the housing waiting list goes down, that's a positive. If it's going up, it's a bad, and I accept that. So why is it proposed to remove this? I think we're fooling ourselves if taking that out is going to help any debate or discussion we have about housing. Because I want to know, I would have asked, except it's too late now, Chair, but this evening, why is the number going up? Why is it going up? That's the question. To take that out is not going to solve anything, because I will still ask Mr. Mountford, either at the committee or by email, how many people are on the housing waiting list? People need to know this, Chair.
Yes, and it's easily available by asking a question. So, I mean, there's a housing waiting list. Go on, Tom, you come in first, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I did anticipate it, so I did build in the target that we would set should it remain. So that's why there is a target that's been built into there and some commentary aside it. The reason for the proposal of removing that performance indicator is that it isn't actually a performance indicator. It's not really indicative of the performance of the council or the service. It is a figure and it is interesting and it does tell you something, but isn't necessarily performance related. What we proposed to do was in lieu of removing that was the addition of a new performance indicator at the bottom of the report, which surrounds the number of households in contact with the housing service that have access to accommodation. So that's more related to the performance of the team and the service. But also, as a sort of reference in there, that within the commentary we would include the number on the housing register to again set that context of we have so many people on the housing register, this many people we've been able to help support into accommodation. So we're conscious it's important for reference for the committee, but recording it as a performance indicator probably isn't the right way forward, but that was the proposal at least.
Well, I think it is an indicator of something, Chair, and I think it is an indicator of the state of the housing market or housing situation in the city. That's why I think it should be retained. Because on the same argument that Mr. Mountford has just put forward, the number of affordable housing completions is not a target either, because that's determined by the planning committee. You know, we can sit here and say we want more. Well, of course we want more. Whether we get more is extraneous factors. Do developers want to build more? Does the planning committee grant planning permission? So that's no more an indicator either. Useful to know. That's why I think we should leave that on. But equally, to take this one off, I think people might think, well, hang on, what are they trying to hide? I just think it's for the sake of the debate and the discussion in future meetings, Chair. It's helpful to have this figure. Take it out if you want, but all you're doing, you're hiding something. I can't see the honest reason other than the fact that it's going up, which is bad. But then if it's going up because it's bad, this committee needs to discuss why it is, not to hide it.
Sure, but it's not a performance indicator. That's the fundamental element. And going back to your earlier, the point regarding the housing, number of affordable housing completions, that's measures we have control over, whether that's through planning, whether that's through economic development, whether that's through, those are the measures that we have control over and that we can influence. The number of people on the housing list, we have no influence over, except by obviously reduction, hence why I don't see your case. And it's easily available. There's no hiding the fact that there's thousands of people on the waiting list. We mention it in every meeting, so there's no getting away from that. The solution is to build more housing to accommodate that, isn't it? You know, that's the reality of it. And I completely agree with you in terms of that, but that, as a performance indicator, doesn't belong on the scorecard. Councillor Teixeira.
Thank you. A different topic. I was out and about with a member of the Youth Services team a couple of days ago, and they were saying how difficult it is to resolve ASB inquiries within a single month. I mean, it's amazing that there's an 85% figure there. So is it perhaps advisable to allow a stat that shows ASB resolutions that were more than a month? Because a month doesn't seem like a dreadfully long time to deal with complicated situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to reduce that target because we would want to try and resolve cases quickly. As you might be aware, the performance around that performance indicator over the past few quarters has dipped. It's generally been around that figure. But that's sort of indicative of some of the complexities that we've had to deal with and the requirement to work with other organisations to resolve cases. And what we don't want to do is to close the case until it's been resolved, because otherwise it's not really telling the true picture. So we could do that. We can include information in the commentary again as a means of sort of explaining that in more detail and that sort of percentage of cases over a month. But yeah, I don't know whether the trajectory will continue along as we have seen over the past couple of quarters, or whether we'll be able to resolve that. But we do want to still strive to resolve cases as quickly as possible, conscious of the impact that ongoing antisocial behaviour does have on people, as we heard this evening.
Yeah, that's not in dispute at all. I'm just looking really not to do down the other work that the team does. You know, it's more complicated than that.
Okay, do we have any other more comments? No? Can we take those, note those, approve them? Agreed. Agreed, thank you. Don't think there's any other business? No? Except that members of this committee, if you're on it, post-May and post-local governance review, we will be taking on items from the Health and Wellbeing Committee. So make sure that that you allocate till 11 p.m. next time, before we finish. So you may wish to reconsider your your committee places post-May. Can I say thank you for that? The first item that we had was particularly touching, and everybody made a really, really valuable contribution to that, and showed a clear message from this council that the level of frustration, in the mildest terms, out there, and we've represented our residents really well. Thank you.